Hello, welcome to Family Values at Work State Victories live stream. I'm your host, Stacy Bryant, a Family Values at Work state organizer. And today we would like to talk about how we witnessed significant victories in the movement for paid family and medical leave. As a part of the implementation time, this live stream will highlight the recent successes in our network, specifically Maryland and Minnesota, are the latest states to pass paid leave legislation, showcasing the progress made in the nationwide fight for paid leave. We'll share with you today that paid leave is achievable through a combined strategy of grassroots efforts, advocacy, and policy work. I hope that you'll enjoy this live stream today, and let's get started. So, I'd like for our panelists to actually introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and start with Marilyn. If Jude United for Justice can go ahead and start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us on. This is a really exciting opportunity to celebrate wins and to share some lessons learned. My name is Matan Zemmer. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a Maryland community organizer with a local group called Jews United for Justice, which is a member of the Maryland Time to Care Coalition.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Lisa Klingemeyer. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the acting director of advocacy at Catholic Charities of Baltimore, which is the largest private provider of social services in the state of Maryland. We've been a part of the Time to Care Coalition since its inception in Maryland and really excited to be here.
Thank you. Trap?
Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here. My name is Trap Jervy. I'm the executive director of Maryland Rise. We are a nonprofit that works here in Maryland to create better situations for workers and working families. And we are a member of the Time to Care Coalition. So happy to be here today.
Thank you, our Maryland team. Now we're going to go to Minnesota, starting with Diana.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, y'all. Super happy to be here. My name's Diana Grandal. I use she, her pronouns, and I was one of the organizers for our ESST campaign here at Take Action, Minnesota.
Thank you. Vivian?
Hi, everybody. My name is Vivian Ihekronya. I'm one of the lead organizers at Isaiah in Minnesota and was the field and comms chair of the Minnesotans for Paid Family Medical Leave Coalition.
Thank you, Vivian. Sean?
Yeah, Sean Theta Place, he, him pronouns. I'm the interim organizing and policy director for MSA. Our great team in Minnesota, Melco and Nick Core, were central in working with the great folks from the Minnesota squad here. And so I was really excited to be able to join and be able to talk about what it means and how we're going to build on some momentum moving forward.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Alicia.
Nice. Hi, everyone. And it is Elijah. And I'm a small business leader here with Main Street Alliance. I'm super excited to have this opportunity to be here with you guys. I am the owner of First Class Cleaning Services here in Minnesota.
Thank you, Elijah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay.
So let's get started here. So Maryland folks, first, congratulations and great work. We know that this was a hard, heavy lift. Could you define for us what is paid family and medical leave and what was the road to winning look like?
So paid family and medical leave is sort of the radical concept that everyone's going to need to take time off at some point in their life. That can be for really exciting reasons, like welcoming a new child into your home, whether that's through birth or through adoption or through fostering. Sometimes it's for reasons that are more crisis and catastrophic in nature, whether that's a health crisis or a family member getting ready to go on deployment or returning from a hard deployment. It also is available for caregivers. So if you are in a caregiving role for a parent or a partner or a loved one, it allows individuals to take time away from work to be able to take time to care for themselves or a family member for all of those life's expected and unexpected things that come up. In Maryland's case, we have a 12-week program, so that it's 12 weeks of paid leave. Every state's a little different, but that was what we were fighting for in Maryland. Our campaign really started probably a decade ago. Maryland did a study that looked at paid leave policies and determined in around 2017 the state should enact a policy, it would make fiscal sense, it would be well utilized. So the first legislation that we actually rallied around was in 2019. And so we created the Time to Care Act of 2019 and created a coalition, the Time to Care Coalition. And we knew it would be a multi-year campaign, as these sort of big new issues are. We did not anticipate, as no one did, a worldwide pandemic in 2022. So that really shaped some of our advocacy on the issue. Both, I think there was sort of a different understanding of how crises arise and people will need time off. At the same time, it also created a wide variety of issues the General Assembly was sort of grappling with at the same time. So in 2021, this would have been our third year of the campaign. We thought we had a good campaign. We had a good bill. We had done some work to build a coalition, but legislators were telling us that they weren't hearing from their constituents that this was their main priority. They were hearing about other things, housing, childcare, lots of issues, but they were not hearing about paid leave. And so the summer of 2021, we really underwent an opportunity to create a grassroots organizing plan. We went out to communities, we went out to fairs and parades and at ice cream socials and all sorts of things to get Marylanders on board with our campaign, to connect legislators to their constituents, and to really raise this issue up from the grassroots. So 2022 was the year that we really kind of brought all of that momentum and organizing into the policy space and created a movement that legislators couldn't ignore anymore. And so 2022 was actually the year that we passed our legislation. We did have another bill this year, and we can get more into the details later, but that's sort of kind of Maryland's journey. Is started with a study. We had bills for a couple of years. The pandemic certainly created sort of a new lens of which to look through the issue. And then after an organizing strategy, we built the momentum we needed in 2022 to pass the legislation.
10 years is a long time, long time. Matan or Trav, did you want to add to that?
No, Lisa did a great job kind of going over what our bill was and why we all kind of got together to make this possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, looking at Minnesota, again, congratulations to you all and thank you for all your work. Same question applies. What was the road like winning this? And I know that I believe you guys have been working on this for 9 years, so about a decade as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Shockingly so. So I'll say a little bit about our process, and then excited to have others chime in too. So we've been working on it for almost 10 years. Our process actually started with a set of focus groups and having conversations on the doors and in church basements and in people's living rooms, and just having conversations about the crisis of care. And it became very clear that this was a problem across the state of Minnesota. And so we did the work to find authors for the bill, to make sure that we could have a set of partners to be able to spearhead forming the coalition. So Isaiah, the Children's Defense Fund, and Minnesota AFL-CIO are the co-chairs of the coalition. And we found that one of the most important ways of passing this policy was having a wide swath of stakeholders who can make the case for why this policy was so important. And so Main Street Alliance was an absolutely incredibly important player alongside with Take Action to make sure that we could show that the faith community, business, labor, farmers, everyone's going to need this policy at some point. And so I really appreciate Lisa's comment that the power of being able to build a mandate, being able to tell the story of the stakes of not having this policy is absolutely crucial to a success. So it took us almost 10 years. This trifecta finally gave us the ability to have a governor, a Senate, and a House that felt accountable to Minnesotans and to this need. And I absolutely do think the pandemic definitely sent a message about what happens when people don't have this policy. So.
Thank you, Vivian. What would Diana or Elisha or Sean like to add?
Yeah, I would just, Elisha, would you be willing to share your personal story about why paid leave was important to you and kind of what your member journey and your leadership on this issue looked like during the course of the campaign?
Absolutely. So I've been working on this campaign for a little over a year, and being a small business owner, I started a business right in the midst of the pandemic, and I ended up getting sick where I had to have my gallbladder removed. And I was looking for help actually, and I just was like, well, where do I go? I'm a business owner. Who do I look to? I had no resources, and that's how Main Street Alliance came apart. And it was something that I needed, in regards to myself. I took a big hit for about maybe 60 days of recovering, and that was just drastic for me. I had no support. I have two kids. I didn't have no resources, so it was a huge fight. I wanted to be the face of it. I wanted to make sure that I'm doing the groundwork of it. I wanted to be a part of that community because I found out that other people was fighting for something that I was looking for. So the timing was perfect for me. The work was tremendous. It was rewarding. It was very being committed and showing up in places even if no one's there. It showed me that my voice mattered. It gave me a different outlook on just rules and regulations in regards to state laws. It was a conversation that became pretty much a lifestyle for a little bit, for a year or so, and it was very, very, very rewarding because it was days I'm like, well, I can't make it there. I can't do, I have to be in my business, but I need to be fighting for this too, and then my employees need this. So it was a very awesome experience, I would say. I can only hats off to those that have been fighting for years and years now. So hats off to you guys, and I'm glad that I was able to be a part of it this last year or so.
Well, thanks, Elisha. And I just want to say one quick thing, which is I was blown away by the Minnesotans for Paid Family Medical Leave coalition that the folks on this call were from Minnesota were a part of or helping to lead, because it was just seeing the WhatsApp texts, the communications assets, the real the real efforts to have a coordinated effort to be able to get this done. I don't think would have been possible without having such a robust and strong coalition, and then having voices of folks like Elisha to really make that case to say this is a pro small business policy. There's a lot of folks out there who want to claim that paid leave is going to hurt business. It's not. Folks have to take time. People get sick. People have kids. They are having to take care of a loved one. These things are going to happen. The question isn't whether or not people are going to need time off. The question is whether or not we're going to, as a society, come together to create a form of social insurance to make sure that they don't get put into poverty as a result of that. And so it's just really blown away and just really happy to see the ability to get that win, but also seeing the momentum all across the country right now, and the opportunities that present themselves. And I think a lot of states are looking at Minnesota as the North Star, so to speak, as well as Maryland and other folks who've recently passed it, to say, this is possible and that we can all get it done. And they've already shown us the way.
Definitely. And it sounds like from both states, there's a lot of people power and a lot of dedication and community and lived experiences that have allowed you all to do this work and be successful in it. Diana, want to share with us, what was one of your proudest moments in doing this work as an organizer?
That's a really great question, Stacy. And I think one of the proudest moments for me was getting to see the impact of like one of my leaders like writing a couple of LTEs and then getting to share her story in a lobby visit, and then getting to call her like after the Senate passed the bill, being like, OMG, like what you did, the action that you took like really mattered, alongside all of the other like coalition partners who are organizing people to take action and stuff like that, and to get to like support her in like feeling some ownership over this win and some ownership over like her power and her story. It's just like so awesome.
Amazing. And Marilyn, I'll pose the same question to you all. What were some of your proudest moments in leading up to this success?
So I think one of the proudest things for me, and I think for the rest of the coalition, is the relationship building that we had within the coalition. We were able to create this strong coalition and steering committee based on really like a trust among each other and a shared investment in the program. Many members of the steering committee had personal connections to the legislation, had family members or who needed this kind of assistance, things like that. But spending time building those relationships, creating clear guidelines about how decisions would be made, we were able to run this program in a way that created very little friction and that people could trust. When we came as one singular voice to legislators and to other advocates and to people, they saw that not only were we serious and capable of getting this done, we had a clear vision for it. So that's something I was very proud of, certainly.
Matana Lisa?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Obviously, we're super excited to build on the successes in other states across the country to pass one of the most comprehensive paid leave programs. And, what we've done in Maryland would not have been possible if it weren't for all the work that's been done in other states previously. It's been a constant learning journey, and that's been a really amazing process. I think the other piece I'm really proud of is that from the outset, we sort of set 5 core principles that we believed would be essential for a strong and equitable paid family and medical leave program. And through our coalition's advocacy, the final legislation, even after all of those years of advocacy, was passed with all 5 principles, strongly in place. And these included things like being cost effective for workers, employers, and the government, with employers contributing at least as much as employees, covering all working people and having it apply equally to all people regardless of gender, and reflect an inclusive definition of family, include the well-established reasons people need paid family and medical leave. We know that often opponents bring ways to try to water that piece down a lot. We were able to pass it with, I think, one of the strongest definitions there, and openness. As it was said previously, provide up to 12 weeks of leave and replace a substantial share of workers' usual wages, right? This is a partial wage replacement, but for folks who need it most, it's covering up to 90%, a pretty significant chunk. And then finally, and certainly not least, protecting workers against adverse consequences, particularly job loss for taking leave, which we know is a big issue. And so having strong job protections was one of those core 5 principles. And we believe that the program as it was passed will really keep people safe from those consequences. So I just think that was really exciting. We were clear from the beginning, and we could sort of check against that at the end. Like, did we accomplish it with those core pieces? And reflecting, we were all really pleased to see that after the years of opposition and work with, various stakeholders, we were able to hold true to all of those pieces.
Heard. And as I think Sean mentioned before, life is just going to happen. It's not necessarily how, it's when it's going to happen. And this is going to help so many people in their lives when you're trying to just survive. So Lisa, I'm curious, what's one thing you wish folks had known about the legislation that you were fighting for?
I think that everybody needs this. It's sort of as simple as that. When we were doing advocacy work, we would hear a lot that people understood the family leave, like they got, when children are coming into a home, we're going to need time for that adjustment. I think folks kind of got the caregiving piece. We want to make sure we're with our family members through that hard time, be it hospice or aging, but sort of that crisis of medical emergency area. We heard legislators, even our friends, say, do 30-year-olds really need this? Are they going to want to pay for this? And I feel like that was a struggle. It was a struggle for me personally, because I have lived experience with being diagnosed with cancer in my 30s, very unexpectedly, and thankful to have had a program like this through my employer, but many people don't. And so I think for me, it was a real challenge to try and help folks understand that you're lucky if you don't have to use this whenever you're in your life in most cases. But life's just not that predictable, and you don't know what cards are going to be dealt. And we need to have the safety net in place so that if a 30-year-old gets in a car accident and they can't work, they have this, that no matter what the situation is, Marylanders will know that if something happens to them, good or bad, where they're going to need paid time off, this program's going to be there. And I think that was one of the challenges that we had to kind of navigate in our advocacy efforts around the bill.
And same for Minnesota. What do you wish that folks had known about the legislation that you guys were fighting for either paid family medical leave or earned safe and sick days.
Yeah, I can share that when we were putting together our one-pagers, I was like, I wish everyone knew this. Like the policy, because it is state administered, state run, it is much cheaper than having private insurance companies run it. And in some cases, like the cost of being able to have this policy is a cup of coffee a week, right? So I was like, I wish more people knew that and knew that when we throw in together, when we have something that's state run, state administered, everyone gets to contribute, everyone benefits. And I think that is a powerful way for us to be able to take care of each other in times of great need, and knowing that it is better to go it together than go it alone. And so I'm excited to make sure that we can continue to amplify that. But I do wish people knew that along the way.
And policy is definitely hard to understand if it's never been broken down and explained to you, especially like trying to meet people where they're at. So like the coalition work that you both Maryland and Minnesota has done is a labor of love. And I think, Trap, you mentioned that there's trust that has to go into that. What is it like working with such a diverse team of folks in actually meeting people where they're at?
So, like you said, the best part about our coalition has been, kind of like I was saying earlier, the diversity that our coalition brought to the steering committee, the coalition more largely, and also the diverse set of skills that all the different organizations and individuals brought to the table. So, for example, JUFJ, and Matan specifically is an excellent community organizer. He was able to bring a lot of bodies to, our events and our rallies and things like that. Lisa and Catholic Charities have just immense policy knowledge, and were able to kind of guide us through all the complex legalese that most of us struggle to understand. And on top of that, we had lots of labor partners, union partners who were able to bring the workers' perspective and other lobbying skills. So it was really a pleasure to work with everyone in the steering committee and the larger coalition, just constantly in awe of everyone's skills and abilities. And we wouldn't have been able to get such strong legislation passed if it wasn't for our ability to do that and to work together well.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly to add that, in terms of the coalition work, I think we've tried to continuously ask the question of who's not at the table and what can we do to bring them into the coalition. Even when we've been less successful at this, it's been important to operate with an awareness of how our coalition spaces are being inclusive and how the policies we're fighting for are actually shaped by the people who are most involved and most directly impacted. And they're key parts of the legislation that was passed in the end, and as a part of the core pieces of the campaign that were shaped specifically by the needs, awareness, and experiences of the people involved in the coalition. And that's ranged from, very specific things in the legislation to very specific tactics that we used during the campaign. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to jump in to share about the, my paid leave story piece, because that was sort of a really winning piece that we pulled in towards the 11th hour.
Yeah, in 2022, so the year that the legislation passed, we were doing a Twitter storm to try to get the House on board, and we did my care story. And we asked folks to post a picture and share a little bit on Twitter about their care story. And the members of our coalition went first. And I think it was really an opportunity for us to remember that even as we're working in these positions as lobbyists or advocate or organizer, we're also the Marylanders who would benefit from this. And so even sharing our own vulnerability in the space about how this policy would impact us, I think brought us closer together as a coalition, but also sort of lended that self to build the bonds of trust that we know we're all working in this together. We deeply care about this issue because it's an issue that impacts us and our neighbors and our communities. And so that was really, I think, a powerful moment, the social media storm that we did, and having the steering committee members share their stories first.
And the sharing of the stories is very important. That brings me back to Elijah. Can you tell me how your perspective has changed on how to organize and work within a campaign because of what you learned with working within a coalition?
Yes, I would say it has changed tremendously because from being a business owner and having a business perspective, I have to be relatable. And I think that's what made it more realistic for everyone to kind of come together. We made it very personal. We didn't, like a lot of people when you're giving people black and white, it's a lot of things that get missed. So when you make it a story and you make it more relatable, they're more to listen. They're like, okay, well, let me see more. I want to see more. So I think for me, my perspective has changed to be more storytelling when I'm trying to get my point across, and also making sure that I'm speaking from an experience. People are more relatable to say what I have done or what it have done for me in regards to benefit, rather than like, oh, I think this will help you, or being certain for me. So in regards to organizing, I have a very different perspective in regards to the power of people. That's what a power is the people.
Absolutely. And Sean, I like to also pose that question to you with working with other small businesses, because I know there's sometimes some pushback about how it's not going to help other small businesses. How has their perspective changed or yours changed working with other small business owners on the
Yeah, I would say that with members of Main Street Alliance and with small business owners, we represent what we would consider to be true small business owners. So that could be people who are sole proprietors, have a couple of staff. We do have some members that are larger, a little bit larger than that as well. But really, those are the business owners that have much more in common with their staff than they do with a corporate CEO, right? And so for a lot of them, there may be questions about how do we implement this? How do we make sure it works for folks? And to Vivian's point earlier, as far as the graphic, one thing that I really liked in Minnesota is that there was this graphic that was put together that did a very good job to show how it would work, how much income replacement there would be, and it was a progressive structure. So folks who are low earners would get higher wage replacement. And then just making it clear that the way that's structured is both at a very reasonable cost for what it is, and that folks will actually be able to get the care they need, because clearly the private sector has not stepped up in this way, and this is a much better option for folks. And so I think that as you work with folks, just figuring out a way to make it work. And one thing I'm really proud of, and this is work that's been done by a lot of folks on the ground in Minnesota, is this was one of the most pro small business versions of paid leave that's passed, and that's because the small business owners themselves had the ability and gave a lot of input during the process, whether it was I think it was 20 hearings, something to that extent. The hearing process is very interesting in Minnesota, but there was a lot of opportunity to provide feedback. There was a lot of opportunity to be able to testify, to be able to tell stories, as Elisha said. And I think for a lot of folks, it's just like they have similar lived experiences. And if you look at who small business owners are, they tend to skew actually pretty heavily in the direction of women. And so I think that for us, it's really about how do we make sure that both working with folks to be able to make sure the policy works for those folks, but also, frankly, a lot of big business groups, they don't want the competition. If you are a large corporation and you can offer paid leave as a benefit, you don't want the small business down the street to be able to provide that benefit, because it puts you on a level playing field. And so it was really important, I think, in all these fights to make sure that small business voice authentically is represented and in an organized way. And I'm happy to say that we were able to do that in Minnesota, but looking forward to other states, make sure that that's also the case as well, because that's clearly going to be one of the biggest factors, is getting folks who want to support this policy to understand that it is a pro small business policy.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue. So we know that the laws are passed, which means that eventually workers can apply for these benefits, but we know not necessarily right away. So can both states share, when can workers actually start applying for paid family and medical leave in your state?
So in Maryland, people can start applying for the program in January of 2026, which is a bit of a ways out. We would like to see it start as soon as possible, but we do want to give the Department of Labor the time they need to construct an effective program. After the legislation passed, we are now working on the regulations directly with the Department of Labor. And that is a process that you can't rush. They need to staff up. They need to do all sorts of things. And we've been lucky. They've been including the coalition in that process. So not till January 2026, but we're getting things rolling as quickly as we can, or the Department of Labor is, and we're helping.
Thank you. In Minnesota?
Yes, oddly enough, same date, January 1st of 2026. So that'll be a big date for both states. And, we're also working with the Department of, if I can remember it well, DEED, Department of Employment and Economic Development. I remembered it. So working with DEED to make sure that implementation is going well. The governor has been thinking a lot about how can it be easy for people to be able to receive the benefit. So it's been encouraging to hear that there's some real intention and thought given to how can this be accessible? Because it's one thing to pass a policy, it's another thing for it to be accessible and easy to benefit from. And so I'm really encouraged by that. And I think there will be a lot to do in the next 2.5 years to keep reminding people that this policy was one, remind people that this is something that they should be excited about and expect. And then also to detract, to Sean's point, from those who might try and weaken the policy through, upcoming legislative sessions. So.
And Diana, I'm curious, what do you think organizing and advocacy looks like between now and 2026?
Great question. I think it looks like a huge effort for all organizations within our coalitions to continue building base and getting out there, meeting people, and ensuring that everybody knows what they need to do to apply for this benefit and to continue supporting, like Vivian was talking about, making sure that there aren't any sort of knockoffs that happen in the next couple of legislative sessions, and being in good connection with their legislators at the Capitol. And then continuing to fight for even further better programming and more extensive resources for that sort of community safety net.
Lots to do between now and 2026, but it's going to be a big year. I can believe it. So my last and final question for you all, and I'd like for all you all to chime in, because we have some other states that are launching paid leave campaigns towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year. What are some words of encouragement that you have, especially knowing that you guys have put a decade into blood, sweat, and tears into this work? What are some words of encouragement that you have to those that are planning to launch pay leave campaigns?
I can share. For me, I would say stay dedicated, stay grounded, and stay committed. Like it's hard work. It is hard work, but stay true.
Yeah, I would also add having a very viscerally clear power analysis. There are many times when I was leading the field and comms team where we were kind of like, do we need to act now? And then we would go back to the power analysis to make some strategic decisions. And so I just strongly encourage having a power analysis and then building a coalition that can respond to the opposition and go toe to toe with them. Like there were times especially in committee hearings and outside of committee hearings where we would wonder, oh my gosh, we need the labor union to deal with this legislator. And then we need the faith community to deal with this person. And then we need the business community to deal with these 20, it was so powerful to be able to do some strategic deployment of people's strengths and their perspective on why they need paid family and medical leave, and when it can add all together, grounded in a power analysis. It can make the work not only like doable, but also fun when people are kind of leveraging their superpowers and challenging a set of detractors who don't want this policy done. But without a power analysis, you can feel like you have to fight every fire. And sometimes you don't. So that's my advice.
Smart. Deshaun, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that there's going to be a lot of states where implementation is starting. New York has already started. There's quite a few states where that's the case. Oregon, thankfully, they just got through their 4-year policy making or policy writing process. And so that's going online this summer. And so there's going to be some states that you can point to say, this is working. This is helping improve people's lives. And there's going to be real data to back up that. I do think stories will always be the most compelling thing and the most important thing, and just being relentless with lawmakers and in some sense giving them the permission structure to do the right thing by being relentless. But it's also, I think, the reality is that this is starting to roll out in many states where it wasn't before. And so I think that's going to be, to be able to point to that, to be able to tell that story that the world didn't, the ground didn't fall through, people were able to get the benefits they needed. And in fact, if you look at economic growth right now, Minnesota actually is out tracking Wisconsin. And Minnesota is a state that's making these kinds of investments, and Wisconsin isn't. And so I think there's a real argument that could be made from an economic standpoint that this is good for macroeconomic growth and good for jobs and the economy. And making that case, I think, is a really important thing to be able to build support in some of these legislatures, especially ones where it might be a bit of an uphill climb.
Absolutely. Diana.
Yeah, I would say the advice I have is to make big asks and follow through on those, whether it's with coalition partners or folks who you're organizing. It's not enough to ask folks to be like, hey, will you do this with me? You have to follow up, check in, and there's so much in the world that gets in the way of us building the power and winning the fights that we need. And we owe it to ourselves in the movement to take that seriously and ask each other for help.
Absolutely. I think Trap mentioned a lot about building. I'm still stuck on the building of the trust, because when you have a lot of folks in the room, sometimes those voices get overshadowed and really uplifting the community. So Trap, what are your words of encouragement?
I'd say, don't get discouraged by an uphill battle. I was at a conference about a month ago speaking with some organizers in Tennessee who are trying to get something similar to what we passed in Maryland passed there. And they have a trifecta of Republicans. And it was just incredible listening to them and hearing them, their strategies and the ways that they were able to show to these people that, on their face might have ideological differences with them, but, family is a universal, universally understood thing for people. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. And these are policies that are good for everyone. And the detractors are convincing, but for the people that, you're working with and that you need to convince, you just got to hold their feet to the fire and keep pushing that message. This is a good thing for everyone. And like John was saying, this hopefully as this starts to be implemented, we will have some good examples of how this can work really well in our states.
Lisa, did you want to jump in there?
Sure. I would add two things. So one is being present, and then the other is paying attention to timing. So in Maryland, we, in 2022, when we were doing our really big push campaign, we held a rally. And it was the first in-person rally since the pandemic. It was outdoors, socially distanced, everyone was masked, but we really thought it was important to be a visual demonstration of the desire for Marylanders to have this legislation be passed. And it was the day after the Senate president called us and got on board that really kind of pushed the needle of our issue. So being, whether that's in committees or hearings or rallies or town halls or wherever, but being physically present in as many spaces as you can and just being that very visual demonstration representation of how much support there is for this issue can be really important. And then for timing, Maryland really benefited from an election cycle. The year that we passed our legislation, our governor was outgoing, and there was a really big push for who was going to replace him. And I think that sort of created this perfect scenario where the General Assembly wanted to pass this bill because we knew the governor was going to veto it, and he did. And then they were able to override that and use that in their campaign. We also had to tell our people who were running in for governor were often saying, like, our first thing as governor will be to pass paid leave. And we were like, no, friends, it'll be to implement the paid leave we already passed. And so we had to sometimes get folks to sort of readjust their messaging. And so don't be afraid to ask friends if they need to readjust their messaging to do so. But that I think was really important too. Being able to leverage the election cycle was really important in Maryland.
Thank you. And Matan.
Yeah, I'll just say, I feel like in organizing spaces, I often hear the phrase, you only get what you're organized to take. And I think through this coalition, this campaign, I've really come to learn in a much more concrete way what I knew, more philosophically, that, we need power to win. And specifically in this movement, we need people power. And some key components of that you've heard, and I've heard from folks in both states tonight, is that some core components are communication and relationship building. And, you always have to put relationship first is what I've learned, and taking the time, whether that's with your steering committee members, coalition partners, the lay leaders you're organizing, taking that time to sit down, have the coffee, learn people's story, because then you can shift into the communication and getting people to be, empowered to tell their stories to various audiences in various mediums, whether that's in a committee room or an op-ed or on a call, whatever it is, at a rally. It's a lot easier to make those asks once you have relationships. That's why we were able to get, 100 plus people out to a rally in the middle of the winter, in the middle of a pandemic, and then finally, I think that just learn to lean on your partners. Really trust your partners, but lean on them, whether that's your local partners or your national partners. I cannot, emphasize that enough. People have the expertise and are ready and willing to jump in and provide guidance. And I have learned so much from just being able to call on people and ask for help when we don't have the answers. So yeah, people power, and let's keep communicating.
Absolutely. I thank you all for the tremendous work that you guys have done. And Minnesotans who have also done the work, who now benefit from these wonderful paid leave policies. We know the opposition doesn't stop, but neither do we. So we're going to continue to dig in. I'd like to thank our partners and our viewers, as well as our ASL translators. And thank you so much for your time. I hope that those that are watching took some information and learned something new that they weren't aware of before. And those that are starting to prepare to launch their paid leave campaigns have a sense of encouragement and know that they are not alone, and that there's lots of work to do, but you are not alone in it. So thank you so much for joining, you all. I hope that you have a wonderful Thursday, and we will be in touch soon, hopefully with another state with another win.